Every fast car you've ever loved exists because of rules. The 1970 LS6 Chevelle got detuned because of emissions caps. The Dodge Demon requires proof of insurance before you can buy one. NASCAR runs restrictor plates at Daytona and Talladega. But what if none of that ever happened? What if there were no horsepower limits, no emissions standards, no insurance pressure forcing manufacturers to play it safe? This isn't about chaos, it's about what would have survived and what wouldn't. Here's the moment history split. Late 1960s, muscle cars are at their peak. The 1970 Chevelle SS 454 LS6 makes 450 horsepower. The Plymouth Hemi Cuda runs 13-second quarter miles. NASCAR's hitting 200 miles per hour on superspeedways. Then everything changed. Insurance companies started charging young drivers more than the car payment. The EPA set emission standards in 1970. Safety regulations added weight. NASCAR implemented restrictor plates after speeds became too dangerous. Speed became something to control, but in this alternate timeline, none of that happens. Regulators stay out. Insurance companies don't intervene. Racing bodies don't restrict horsepower. Let's explore what that world looks like. First, muscle cars. In our timeline, muscle cars died in the mid-1970s because they got heavy, slow, and expensive to insure. Horsepower dropped, luxury features added weight, performance went underground. In the no-regulation timeline, they evolve. Think about what muscle cars actually were in 1970. Big displacement V8s and relatively lightweight intermediate bodies. The problem was they got loaded with sound deadening, power accessories, and emissions equipment. Without regulation forcing that transformation, muscle cars would have gone the opposite direction. Lighter, not heavier. More aerodynamic, not boxier. More focused on raw performance, not boulevard comfort. By 1975, you'd see factory muscle cars with aluminum body panels to shed weight, aggressive aerodynamics borrowed from NASCAR, radical camshafts and higher compression ratios, fuel injection and turbocharging appearing earlier. Essentially, American muscle cars would have evolved into proto-supercars by the late 1970s. Instead of the 1977 Pontiac Grand Prix making 135 horsepower and weighing 4,000 pounds, you'd have lightweight performance machines making 500-plus horsepower. The Corvette wouldn't have suffered through the malaise era. The Camaro and Firebird wouldn't have been neutered. Detroit would have kept the horsepower wars going and escalating. Now let's talk NASCAR. In our timeline, NASCAR implemented restrictor plates in 1988 after Bobby Allison's car went airborne at Talladega, nearly clearing the catch fence into the grandstands. Speeds had simply become too dangerous. But in the no-regulation timeline, that never happens. NASCAR in this world becomes an unlimited arms race. No restrictor plates, no RPM limits, no rules slowing down aerodynamic development. By the 1990s, NASCAR speeds at Talladega and Daytona would be approaching 250 miles per hour. Teams would be spending Ferrari-level money on wind tunnel testing. Engines would be turning 12,000 RPM with exotic materials. The cars would be faster than anything else on Earth, including Formula One. But here's where it gets interesting. Who could afford to compete? In our timeline, NASCAR's restrictor plates and spec parts kept costs manageable. Small teams could compete. The playing field stayed relatively level. In the unrestricted timeline, NASCAR becomes Formula One level expensive. Only factory teams with massive budgets survive. Independent teams disappear. The sport becomes an elite manufacturer showcase, not a grassroots racing series. And let's talk about supercars. In our timeline, American manufacturers largely ceded the supercar market to Europe. Ferrari, Lamborghini, Porsche, they defined what a supercar was, while Detroit focused on regulations and fuel economy. But in the alternate timeline, Detroit enters that fight early. Think about it. American manufacturers had the engineering talent, the racing budgets, and the V8 expertise. What they lacked was the incentive to build low-volume, high-performance machines. Without emissions and safety regulations forcing them to water down their performance cars, why not go all in? By the mid-1970s, you'd see American supercar programs, lightweight mid-engine V8s from Chevrolet, turbocharged, flat-plane crank monsters from Ford, Chrysler Hemi-powered exotic cars competing directly with Ferrari. These wouldn't be limited production concepts, they'd be legitimate supercar competitors, built in America, priced to undercut European exotics. The entire landscape of high-performance cars would be different, but here's the part nobody likes to talk about: the cost. In our timeline, automotive fatality rates dropped dramatically starting in the 1970s. Seatbelt laws, crumple zones, airbags, better crash testing, all of that saved hundreds of thousands of lives. In the unrestricted timeline, those safety features develop slower. Manufacturers aren't forced to prioritize crashworthiness. Speed and performance come first. Fatality rates stay high or get worse as speeds increase. High-profile crashes in NASCAR don't lead to restrictor plates. They lead to public horror, but the racing continues. Drivers die. Spectators are endangered. The sport becomes notorious for danger, not competition. On the street, fast cars become associated with carnage. Insurance companies, even without regulatory pressure, start refusing to cover performance vehicles at all. Liability lawsuits against manufacturers pile up. Cities and states start banning high-performance cars outright, not because of emissions or noise, because of death tolls. Public backlash reaches a tipping point. Even enthusiasts start saying this has to stop. And here's the paradox. In a world without federal regulation, you'd get a patchwork of local bans that would be even more restrictive. California might outlaw anything over 300 horsepower. New York might ban performance cars in city limits. Insurance becomes impossible for anyone under 30. The result? Performance becomes rare and elite. Only the wealthy can afford the insurance, the legal risk, and the social stigma of owning a truly fast car. Speed doesn't democratize, it becomes a luxury good for the ultra-rich. Meanwhile, innovation stagnates in unexpected ways. In our timeline, regulations forced engineering breakthroughs. Catalytic converters led to fuel injection. Fuel economy requirements pushed turbocharging. Crash testing improved chassis design. In the no-regulation timeline, those innovations happen slower, or not at all. Why develop fuel injection when carburetors work fine with no emissions limits? Why invest in turbocharging when you can just build a bigger engine? Some of the technology that makes modern performance cars so capable exists because manufacturers had to work within constraints. So what would today look like? Modern performance cars would be lighter, louder, and more analog. No stability control, no emissions equipment, no safety nannies. They'd also be more dangerous, less accessible, and socially controversial. You couldn't daily drive a Hellcat because insurance wouldn't exist. You couldn't take a ZL1 Camaro on a road trip because half the states would impound it at the border. Performance would be legendary, but rare. Track days would be invitation only because liability would be impossible to manage. Racing series would fold because insurance costs would be unsustainable. The enthusiast community would be smaller, wealthier, and more insulated. Ironically, the mainstream accessibility of performance we have today, where a middle-class buyer can finance a 480 horsepower Mustang and drive it every day, wouldn't exist. Speed would be reserved for the few who could afford the legal and financial risk. So here's what actually happened. Regulations didn't kill speed, they made it survivable. They forced manufacturers to build safer, cleaner, and more efficient performance cars. They kept insurance costs manageable. They prevented the public backlash that would have banned performance cars outright. The muscle car era ended, but performance didn't disappear. It evolved. It became smarter, more sophisticated, and more accessible to more people. Today, you can buy a 797 horsepower Dodge Challenger Demon 170 and drive it on public roads. That car exists because decades of regulation forced manufacturers to figure out how to make extreme performance work within society's constraints. In the alternate timeline, that car never gets built. Not because it's impossible, because the world it would exist in couldn't sustain it. So what's the real story? In a world without limits, speed wouldn't be canon. It would be feared, banned, and reserved for the wealthy few willing to risk everything. Regulations didn't kill the golden age of performance, they made it survivable.